Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenhead, the Torah and Psychotherapist. This week's Torah and Psychology post about Pinchos. We see the event, the important moment of Moshe Rabbeinu passing on the mantle, the baton of leadership to Yehoshua. And Rashi elaborates and explains that at this point, Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Yehoshua about the leadership, about being in this role of leadership, and in a sense sort of convinced him of this opportunity and the significance that he is taking on this role and the reward that comes along with this. I'm not sure exactly if it means that Moshe needed to convince Yehoshua, that Yehoshua needed to hear these words, that he's going to be rewarded. But what it is stressing is that the significance it stresses the significance and the importance of being a leader of Am Yisrael. And Rashi explains that Yehoshua is actually continuing this in a way project, this task throughout the generations of being the leader of Am Yisrael. And Rashi says the reward is going to be the same for every leader, for future generations. That this is the significance and this is the duty, in a sense, of each leader of Am Yisrael to take on this role, to take on this mantle. And the Chafetz Chaim on the Parsha elaborates further on this and says that we shouldn't think that Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one who is fitting to be the leader of Am Yisrael. Yes, he was the first leader and epitomized the leader par excellence. But what we see is that as long as the values of leadership that Moshe Rabbeinu was imbued into this task, imbued into this role, as long as that is taken on by future leaders, then they are all fit for this role. They are all fit for this duty. That it's not only Moshe Rabbeinu's role, but also now Yehoshua and all the future generations. The sense of there being a reward for every leader is based on the fact that they will all be engaged on the same level of being the leader of Am Yisrael and what that entails. And each one can be successful in that role as long as they are loyal and honest to the values that Moshe Rabbeinu epitomized and represented and showed within his leadership, the values of a commitment, obviously, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the Torah, to the mitzvahs, and to be a leader to the people of Am Yisrael. So that is what we're saying. That is what the Chafetz Chaim is saying, that we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that Moshe Rabbeinu was the only person who was fit to be a leader. But rather, the reward for Moshe Rabbeinu, the reward for Yehoshua, the reward for all future generations is equal because they are actually carrying out the same role without any deviation. And the Chafetz Chaim goes on and actually brings an extra point based on this and says that he remembers there was a time, and going back into his generation, whether there were certain rabbanim or people that complained that there's a certain flexibility that was apparent with the giving of smicha, maybe a reducing of standards, that rabbanim would give smicha to avreichim, rabbanim would give smicha to people without necessarily having to go through the extensive process of smicha, of being an actual expert in all the required knowledge of the Torah and then receiving smicha. There was this feeling that perhaps there was more of some frivolity or some sort of relaxed attitude towards the smicha. Or perhaps it wasn't keeping up to the original standards that were in previous generations. And the Chafetz Chaim replied to this and said that he remembers in the time of the World War I, that it was a time of war, and there was a need for officers in order to be able to manage the war situation, the military situation. So the people who were in the officers who were still studying, you could say, who were studying in the school for becoming an officer, were plucked, were taken out, and were appointed and made officers straight away. It was almost like a shortcut where they were jumped up to becoming an officer. And he said that was necessary. They needed the officers, and they didn't necessarily have all the knowledge complete already with the whole process, but they were put in their position and they learned on the job, essentially. They added to their knowledge, as long as it was based on the values of doing the role of an officer and being honest and committed to that role. He said so too. The Chafetz Chaim was saying about his own time, This is a time of war, in a sense, on a spiritual level. And therefore, even if somebody hasn't learned enough, in a sense, learned everything to the point of expertise, as maybe there was the opportunity in previous times, we need Rabbanim, we need people to be in the role of leadership, and therefore they're given the smicha, and they'll continue to learn, as long as they continue to learn and add to their knowledge, and they'll learn on the job, in a sense. So if we take this to a mental health perspective, I think it's a very interesting message, that if we look at this idea that Chafetz Chaim is saying, at the time of milchama, the time of war, the time of pressure, you need to step up, and you need to do what you can. You need to do your job. So what we see on a psychological level, we sometimes can find ourselves in a situation where it's a time of milchama, it's a time of war, in the sense that we feel pressure, we feel anxious, and we don't feel ready, and we don't feel that we have that we're not competent enough, that we don't have enough knowledge or ability or skills to carry out a certain role or something that we are engaged in, and this anxiety can bring us down. We see ourselves as being in a time of war. We see ourselves as being in a time of emotional war, of anxiety and pressure, and we feel we're not ready. The message here is that as long as you stick to the values, that we're able to identify the values that you have, the goals, and be honest and committed to that, and in an authentic and honest way say that I have certain skills, I have certain knowledge, and what the Chafetz Chaim is saying is you've got to go for it. You've got to not allow the anxiety to bring you down and to restrict you, but rather be prepared to take on the role, take on the task, and you'll learn on the job, and be prepared to work your way through the milchama, to work your way through the anxiety. Because we don't actually have to be perfect. We don't actually have to say, well, I need to have everything complete and ready. Sometimes you've got to go for it, work on the job, learn on the job, and you'll be successful. Have a great Shabbos, and keep well.